Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on autism awareness and acceptance. We are looking ahead to April, which is Autism Awareness Month. Tonight, a live panel joins us for a candid conversation about living with autism and the event they'll be hosting in Ogden. Joining us now is Stacey Burnell, an autism parent and co-founder of Awesome Autistic Ogden, Jessica Adams, special education behavior specialist and co-founder of Awesome Autistic Ogden, and via Zoom, Sarah Shaleen, an autism parent. Thank you all for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you. We are so excited to be here with you.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Stacey. You are a parent to a person living with autism. Could you tell us a little bit about your child and lived experiences?
Yeah, he got diagnosed about 12 years ago, and he is now almost 16. So that's been a long time for us to kind of navigate this world and figure out how to do our best for him. And as he gets older, it gets easier in some ways and harder in some ways. And so we're just kind of rolling with the punches as we go and figuring out how to best help him live his best life.
Sarah, same question to you. You are also the parent to a person living with autism. Could you tell us a little bit about your child and your family's lived experiences?
Sure. She's 11 years old and full-on girl everything. She was diagnosed younger. I honestly can't remember the date. The diagnosis is pretty expensive, so it took us a little bit longer to get that taken care of, but you just, like Stacey said, you go with the flow, we roll with the punches, and she's our life. She's my youngest of 4, and we wouldn't want her to be any other way.
And thank you so much for sharing photos of your children and your families. We love seeing them here on the screen. Turning to you now, Jessica, how did you get involved in working with people on the autism spectrum and specializing in special education?
When I was younger, one of my friends' son was diagnosed with autism, and I watched her go through a really hard time of trying to get him diagnosed. And then once he was diagnosed, it was like, where do we go from here? Fast forward to when I got my degree in teaching, I found myself wanting to work with special education kids. I wanted to help the kids in my classroom who had autism. So I made the switch to SPED, and I never looked back.
I love that. I love that there's a personal tie here for you. Now, Stacey, how does Utah compare to the national average when it comes to autism?
Well, Utah is slightly above average. The most recent numbers from the CDC is that the national average is 1 in 54 children is diagnosed with autism, and Utah's average is 1 in 47. So yeah, we're a little bit higher than the national average.
Yeah, a few of the reports that I have read have always consistently listed Utah in like the top 3 or the top 5 as far as rates for ASD in the entire country. Now, Sarah, how does autism spectrum disorder differ across gender, maybe between boys and girls?
Well, obviously I only have personal experience with a girl, but I know it's very similar along normal gender lines. Girls are less likely to be diagnosed. I think it's like 1 in 4 diagnoses are girls, and then if they're higher functioning, I think it's 1 in 10. Don't hold me to that, but I know it's a lot less likely for a girl to be diagnosed with autism. And then as they get a little bit older, girls, I don't know if they can handle it a little bit better at school or in social settings. They kind of pick up on the social cues, but I looked online at one time because I didn't know what was going on, and they call it the 4 o'clock explosion or something like that, because when school ends, it gets a little wild because they have to just let go. They've been holding it in all day trying to pretend, and as they get a little bit older, you end up struggling with depression and anxiety. So I know that it's a little more common along the lines of girls dealing with that than boys, but either way, I think it's just is what it is.
It's interesting, and it's something that we look forward to learning more about as experts learn more about ASD. Now, Jessica, how does mental illness such as anxiety, depression, and suicide ideation impact those with ASD?
You know, I think it's really important to remember that our community deals with these things all the time. Autism does not make someone exempt from other mental health illnesses. So we need to make sure that we are cognizant of people with autism having depression or anxiety and supporting them that way.
And that's something that is so interesting to me, because sometimes those with ASD, they're not as vocal about what they're going through. We already know there's a stigma, right, with mental health. It's already hard enough for someone to vocalize what they're going through, seeking help, and let alone having to deal with ASD as well. Okay, Stacy, Jessica, and Sarah, hold that thought. We have to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on autism awareness and acceptance. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on autism awareness and acceptance. Before the break, we were joined by Stacy Burnell, Jessica Adams, and Sarah Shalane for a live panel discussion. We pick up now right where we left off. Sarah, we will turn to you first. What are some of the barriers, challenges, or difficulties for families who have a child with autism?
Well, you develop a sense of humor and a thick skin quickly. And I think you just really have to be understanding, find a tribe of people that are going to support you. And it's hard. It's not easy. Not every day is great, and not every day is bad either. I guess that's just parenting in general. But if you don't surround yourself and talk with your other kids and your significant other about how to get through some of the harder times, I could see it being very, very challenging for other families. So it's challenging. It's tough.
I also want to throw this out there, is that there are also financial barriers for those who may not be able to afford therapy or counseling. And the CDC estimates that the annual cost of intensive behavioral intervention can range anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000 per child. Sarah, this next question is also for you. There's a mental health aspect for parents raising children with autism, like you had mentioned and shared a little bit about. What can you tell us about this that maybe the general public doesn't know or isn't aware about?
I think sometimes, like if your child's having a meltdown or really struggling, not wanting to go to school, you would think that it's just maybe a discipline situation. That you're not disciplining your child or something. That's just not the case. And I think unless you've been around somebody that's autistic, or you love someone that's autistic, or you just don't understand, there's a lot that goes into every day. If you try to go out of town, if you try to change anything in life, it could cause a meltdown. And I think it's just really important to, if you don't have a strong support system, a strong group of friends, that you have a great therapist. I think it'd be very helpful.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Stacy, let's talk about intersectionality. How much harder is it for someone living with autism if they are a person of color or LGBTQ+?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I cannot speak to that topic with the firsthand knowledge of living that experience, but I do follow a lot of people in that community, and knowing what their experiences are and kind of what they share. When we talk about intersectionality in general anyway, we know that when we are checking off certain boxes and identities, that it opens up more opportunities for discrimination, for just opportunities to be hurt. And so certainly when you throw in autism, and autism often, it's not a diagnosis that's just by itself. So for example, with my son, he is ASD, he also is ADHD and unspecified anxiety disorder. So that's 3 different diagnoses. And then when he's having a meltdown, it's kind of like, is it the autism? Is it the ADHD? Is it the anxiety? What is the reason why he's having this issue right now? And we can't separate them. That's part of the intersectionality. And then obviously when we throw in these, when we're throwing in race, when we're throwing in gender, gender identity, it just creates more and more challenges for neurodiverse people to feel comfortable to feel safe and loved in their space. And so, yeah, how do we overcome those obstacles to help create loving and safe, inclusive spaces for these people in the different intersectionalities?
Yeah, so much difficulty to navigate. So this leads to my next question. Jessica, what are some myths and misconceptions that need to be debunked about families with a loved one that has ASD?
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear is that people with autism aren't social. And I think where the misconception is people with autism struggle with navigating social situations and social interactions, but it's not that they don't want to be social, it's that they struggle with that social piece. And so I think that with that acceptance piece that we're talking about tonight is that we need to make sure that we are teaching our own children to initiate those conversations with the student that they know has autism, speaking to our students about inviting them to birthday parties, speaking to our kids about playing with them at the playground or sitting next to them at lunch, at school, because that is such a big misconception that they aren't social.
Those connections, no matter how big or small, mean so much to everybody. Now, Jessica, in September, a 13-year-old Utah teen who is on the autism spectrum made national news when he was shot 11 times by a police officer. What do we know about people with disabilities when it comes to incidents or interactions with law enforcement?
You know, I can't speak specifically to that situation, but what I can talk about, and I can use Hayden as an example, is that Hayden is a big kid. He is 6 foot, 6'1". He kind of always has a furrowed eyebrow, even when he's happy. And sometimes when he is overly stimulated or overwhelmed or he's anxious, he has some really big behaviors and big, he might throw things, he might yell, he might be swearing. And so for onlookers, it might look like a very neurotypical kid having a big outburst. And so I can see how those types of situations would be really, really hard for people coming in. And I think what's really great is Utah passed a bill recently for law enforcement to have autism training. And so I think that's really important because if a cop were to come up on Hayden, he might actually become more overwhelmed and shut down or run or be put into that type of situation as well.
And that's why the education and understanding is just so important. One thing I will throw out there is a 2015 study by the Ruderman Foundation found that individuals with disabilities make up a third to half of all the people who have been killed by police officers. All right, Stacy, Jessica, and Sarah, hold that thought. We have to take another quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on autism awareness and acceptance. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on autism awareness and acceptance. Before the break, we were joined by Stacy Burnell, Jessica Adams, and Sarah Shalene for a live panel discussion. And this time, Sarah's daughter Kenzie joins our conversation. We pick up now right where we left off. Stacy, let's start with you this time. I'd like to talk about the impact of language. I've heard some people tell me that the adjective autistic is offensive, that it's more respectful to say a person on the autism spectrum, same with disabled versus a person living with a disability. What is your take on this, and what should someone know when they want to use language that is respectful and humane?
Thank you, and I think this is such an important question because Jessica and I were just talking about this, and a lot of people ask me, the short answer is ask people what they prefer, but the longer answer is that there's debate. There's debate in the community, and that, as Jessica will attest, in education and in scholarly research, that they are taught and trained to do person-first language. And then you get out into kind of the real world. I follow a lot of disabled and autistic influencers, and you will notice that's how I address them, as disabled and autistic, because that's how they say they want to be addressed. And so it's hard to be respectful of both sides because they have different perspectives. So I ask, and I even asked my son, like, do you have a preference? And he's 15, he doesn't care. But when he gets older, it's going to be whatever his preference is. And when I deal with anyone kind of with these identities, I just ask what their preference is.
That's a great answer. Sarah, what can we do as individuals to help improve the quality of life for those on the autism spectrum?
I don't think that it's really just about awareness. I think Jessica really touched on it. It's acceptance. Just accept them. Accept them as adults. If you, chances are you work with autistic people or you run into them daily. And when they're young and at school, obviously it's extremely important. But just, it's okay if somebody's not looking you in the eye when they're talking to you, they're not being disrespectful. Or if they are really struggling because it's loud outside, be kind. You know, just be kind and accept that not everyone is exactly like you, and it takes us all to make this world.
I love that. Kenzie, let's bring you into the conversation. What would you like the community to know about autism?
I would just like everybody to know to, like, if you see an autism person that has autism, like, all of the autistic people would want, I know that they would want to be treated the same way that everybody is treated in this world, and that we are all the same, and we all are human.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kenzie. That was a great answer. Now, Stacey,
And autism's cool.
and autism is cool.
Yes.
Right? We can all agree with that. Stacey, is there anything you'd like to see done on a legislative, governmental, or societal level to better serve families who has a loved one with ASD?
Yeah, so like Jessica said, you know, we just got the bill passed so that law enforcement is doing autism training, which is fantastic. We've had some legislation in recent years where insurance companies are covering some resources for autistic families. There's always more that we can do. I know that in our community, there seems to be a lack of resources, and even when we do have programs and things available, there's often waiting lists that are years long, and then the financial cost on top of it. So, you know, even if someone can get into a program, then they have to overcome that hurdle of how are they paying for it. So all of these things, if we can figure out ways to have more availability of the resources and then have it so that it's financially accessible for everyone. Because, you know, kind of going back to intersectionality, a lot of people are in positions where they don't have the money or the time or the resources to be able to help their kids, and there's a lot of hurdles that we need to overcome to fix that.
Well said. Stacey, we have about 2 minutes left. I've got 2 more questions I want to squeeze in. In the past, I've worked and interviewed adults living with autism, and they told me that they often feel forgotten by their community because society thinks that ASD only impacts children, as if it's something that goes away when you grow up, which we know is not true. What comes across your mind when you think about adults living with autism?
That's what we're looking at right now with my son. I mean, with him being almost 16, what does his future look like? There's probably not going to be 4-year college, which is fine. We don't know what his living situation is going to be. We don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns. So we let him, he's at a point where he's got to learn to self-advocate, and we support him the best we can. And yeah, there's so many unknowns right now. And that's, I know it's not just him. There's so many of these people that you know, again, when we get these resources, we need to be able to help the kids once they age out of school so that they have help beyond that.
Now, Jessica, I'm going to have you jump in here, and Stacey, feel free to chime in if we're missing anything. What can you both tell us about the event your nonprofit organization is hosting, Awesome Autistic Ogden?
Yeah, so Awesome Autistic Ogden, unfortunately this year, has to be virtual, but we have lots of really great things. We have raffles, we have videos of our vendors, and what those vendors are the resources from the community. We're going to be holding Facebook Live and answering questions. We are going to be highlighting families. We are asking for videos of families who have neurodiverse loved ones to give a 2 to 3 minute short video about their journey, about their life, and we would love to highlight them on our virtual Facebook page.
Now, is there a specific date or time or a deadline? Anything that people at home should know as far as the timeline goes?
Well, we're kicking off on April 2nd. We're actually the Monarch in Ogden. We're doing an awesome artistic art stroll. So we can have families come then. If anyone wants to submit art by their autistic children that they want us to feature at the art stroll, just have them reach out to me on Facebook. and just follow the page because all of the information is going to be there and the schedule for the month. But yeah, we've got some really fun activities planned, mostly virtual, but a little bit in person as well. So just head to our Facebook page to learn about what we've got going on.
And if anybody needs help, we'll have all of this information posted on our website in the web article for this story as well tonight. All right, you've been hearing from Stacey Burnell, an autism parent and co-founder of Awesome Autistic Ogden, Jessica Adams, special education behavior specialist and co-founder of Awesome Autistic Ogden, and via Zoom, Sarah Shalene and her daughter, an autism parent and a preteen living with autism. Thank you all for joining us tonight to share your insight, experiences, and perspectives. We appreciate your time.